The reign of Henry VIII, 1509–1547, was a time of immense political and religious upheaval, but beneath the surface, the daily lives of ordinary people were filled with desires, relationships, and sexual norms that were shaped by strict moral codes, the church, and societal expectations. While history often focuses on the infamous marriages and affairs of the king himself, the sex lives of common people were just as complex, though largely hidden behind a veil of modesty and secrecy. Premarital and marital relations for the average person, sex was closely tied to marriage, as the church dictated that it should only take place within wedlock. However, premarital sex was not uncommon, and records show that a significant number of brides were already pregnant at the time of their wedding. This suggests that betrothed couples often engaged in sexual activity before officially marrying, though they risked public shame if a child was conceived out of wedlock. Marriage itself was not always based on romantic love, but was often an economic and social arrangement. Once married, sex was expected and even considered a duty, primarily for procreation. The church emphasized that intercourse should be done for the purpose of having children, and certain positions or excessive enjoyment were sometimes frowned upon. However, within private spaces, many couples likely explored intimacy beyond what religious doctrine strictly allowed. Prostitution and extramarital affairs. Despite the church's strict teachings, prostitution was widespread and to some extent tolerated in Tudor society. Brothels, often referred to as stews, were common in larger cities like London. These establishments operated under a degree of regulation, and some even fell under royal protection. For many poor women, prostitution was a means of survival, though it came with severe risks, including disease and public punishment. Extramarital affairs were not limited to the upper classes, though the consequences varied based on social status. While noblemen, and even clergy, were known to keep mistresses, commoners who engaged in adultery, particularly women, faced harsh penalties such as public shaming, whipping, or even exile from their communities. Sexual knowledge and practices. In an era without modern birth control, methods of preventing pregnancy were rudimentary and often based on folk remedies. Women might attempt to control fertility through herbal concoctions, though these were unreliable and sometimes dangerous. Coitus interruptus, the withdrawal method, was known, but its effectiveness was questionable. Knowledge of sex and the human body was limited, and discussions about it were often shrouded in superstition. Many people believed that conception required female pleasure, which sometimes led to the bizarre legal defense that a raped woman could not become pregnant. Misunderstandings about hygiene, disease, and reproductive health also contributed to high infant mortality and the spread of sexually transmitted infections. Homosexuality and forbidden desires. Homosexuality was harshly condemned during Henry VIII's era. The 1533 Buggery Act, one of the first laws in England to criminalize same-sex relations, made sodomy punishable by death. Though records of enforcement are scarce, fear of persecution forced many individuals to suppress or hide their desires. Other forms of non-traditional sexual activity, such as cross-dressing and unconventional relationships, were viewed with suspicion and could lead to social exile or severe punishment. The influence of religion and the law. The church played a powerful role in controlling sexual behavior, and confession was one way in which private sins, including sexual ones, were monitored. Priests often advised their congregants on what was considered acceptable within marriage, while acts like adultery, fornication, and sodomy could lead to severe public penance or legal punishment. Despite this, human nature ensured that people continued to engage in sexual activity, even if it meant doing so in secret. Conclusion: the sex lives of ordinary people in Henry VIII's time were shaped by a mixture of religious doctrine, legal restrictions, and practical realities. While society publicly upheld strict moral codes, in private, people found ways to explore their desires, sometimes bending the rules imposed upon them. Though much of this history remains undocumented, glimpses into court records, personal letters, and church decrees reveal that passion, pleasure, and secrecy were as much a part of life in the Tudor era as they are today.